Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we're going to talk about the One Ring and the Ring of Invisibility, and why these two magic items that do exactly the same thing are treated so differently in these different realms, and why it matters as Middle-earth continues its path toward being a Dungeons & Dragons canon realm, in my humble opinion. All right, so huge change. It is truly astounding to think all of the changes that have come to Dungeons & Dragons in a single year. It is 2023 is truly an unbelievably a year packed with an unbelievable amount of change. It is astounding. So basically, Middle Earth has never been canon to Dungeons & Dragons, right? Although it has always been essentially the foundation of Dungeons & Dragons, right? So Gary Gygax really created Dungeons & Dragons as an homage to Lord of the Rings. And if you look at Lord of the Rings and you look at Dungeons & Dragons really clearly looks like it looks like Gary simply put a system around Lord of the Rings, right? And so, but Lord of the Rings is the big dog of fantasy. It is the single most shockingly successful fantasy series that's ever existed, with perhaps the exception of Harry Potter. I'm going to put that over on a shelf. We're not going to get into that in this video. I want to keep it tight here. But when you look at, but this year, Magic the Gathering, Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth happened, right? And so Magic the Gathering has been canon to D&D for almost a decade, right? And so by creating Magic the Gathering, Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth, it brings Lord of the Rings one step closer, I think it brings it a centimeter away from being D&D canon, right? And the reason why is what's now been done by the Tolkien estate has been done by lots of other worlds that were made canon D&D worlds, right? This happened to Ravnica, this happened to Theros, this happened to Strixhaven. Every single one of these went through exactly the same pattern and are now D&D canon realms, right? So Lord of the Rings appears to be very carefully making its way to being canon, Dungeons & Dragons canon, right? So with that said, why is the One Ring, right, which was just purchased for $2.5 million by Post Malone, why is the One Ring so powerful in Lord of the Rings, but in Dungeons & Dragons, a Ring of Invisibility is simply a rare magic item that is really not that special from anything else, right? The existence of the One Ring in Lord of the Rings was so significant that the elves, the dwarves, and the humans had to work together to destroy it, right? Whereas in Dungeons & Dragons, a Ring of Invisibility is often, everybody in the party looks at it and says, the rogue should have that. Like, it's that simple, right? And so why is the One Ring so incredibly powerful in the Lord of the Rings, but so close to mundane, treated almost as a mundane, treated as a bog standard magic item in Dungeons & Dragons, right? Which one is right, and how should we resolve this now that Magic the Gathering, Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth has literally been put into the same position as literally thousands of Magic the Gathering cards that are canon to Dungeons & Dragons and are really little more than unbound pages of D&D canon books and D&D canon hardbacks, right? It's just, so how do we resolve this? Well, I think the reality is it's time for Dungeons & Dragons to cleave closer to Lord of the Rings, right? And the reality is, the reason that a Ring of Invisibility is not considered a big deal in Dungeons & Dragons, and it was enough to spawn the greatest quest that ever occurred within Middle-earth, is because Dungeons & Dragons does not have a Ring of Invisibility set at the correct level of power, right? A ring of invisibility should be a huge, no pun intended, game changer in Dungeons and Dragons. And when a player character gets a ring of invisibility, the reality is we should understand that being able to stand in any room and literally hear the answer to every mystery, hear the thoughts of people that are not expected to be heard, right? To be able to be anywhere unseen needs to be massively elevated within Dungeons and Dragons play. And at this point, what we really need to do is we've been underusing Dungeons and Dragons, right? We, for so long, we're like, oh, the height of this game is cutting goblins in half. But now people are saying, you know what, the height of this game may be cutting our own deficiencies in half and using Dungeons and Dragons as a vehicle to explore identity, right? And here, part of that is going to be looking at everything in Dungeons and Dragons and saying, we simply had this wrong. And the ring of invisibility should be, one player character getting a ring of invisibility should be enough to say this player character is now a central part of quests that could literally overturn the entire fate of the realm they're within. Just one simple ring of invisibility, right? And it means we need to really begin to we already systematized the mechanics of everything in Lord of the Rings, right? We have mechanical structures for humans, elves, dwarves, right? What we need now is to go the rest of the way, right? And systematize the narrative, right? So that it matches Lord of the Rings and the quests align. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.